From the lab to your ears, you're listening to WonderLabs.
Hello, and welcome to WonderLabs. This is Chris Richardson, checking in from London town. It's been a rough year for everyone, with the restrictions on exercise, food, and social interactions. The media frenzy augmenting the biological pandemic has sent many people into a state of panic that has impacted on everything from sex to sleep to stress, and, ironically, immune function. Like the WHO, I'm not convinced that an endless cycle of lockdowns, with the harshest UK restrictions being imposed mostly on poor people, was the best course of action. But we are where we are, and this podcast is not the place for that. The fact is that there are many people struggling with their health anyway, and for some, this has been exacerbated by the pandemic. There's endless information out there, but sifting through it is often more trouble than it's worth. So, when I have a new lifestyle idea in mind, I tend to run it by registered nutritional therapist Helen Halliday, aka Helen the Food Coach. I do this because I like to keep things simple. The best routine, whether it's diet, sleep, or working out related, is the one that you stick to. I know myself, and I know that I'll drop a routine in days if it's overcomplicated. So, in this episode, I'm excited to welcome Helen onto the show. Not everybody has access to a nutritional therapist, so I'm bringing one to you to cover some of the fundamentals that can help keep you balanced when everything else is bent. In this episode, we talk about what nutritional therapy is and what it isn't, and how you can separate sage advice from snake oil. We talk about defining health goals and staying motivated to achieve them. We also discuss the Healthy Trinity: sleep, diet, and exercise, plus the superpower that augments them all, mindfulness. While each component of the Healthy Trinity is deeply personal, as you'll hear, Helen offers hard and fast advice for people looking to think about their health, who may not have the means to take a full medical history and work with a therapist. For anyone already acquainted with these ideas, this episode will serve as a healthy reminder. For those who aren't, it should dispel the idea that putting in the work to stay healthy is complicated, expensive, or idealistic. Like the US Navy says, keep it simple, stupid. On that note, I've written some extended show notes to include the main takeaways for the Healthy Trinity: sleep, diet, and exercise, which you can take away and use as you like. Without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Helen Halliday. Helen, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Let's begin with the basics then. So, what exactly is and isn't a nutritional therapist?
It's a brilliant question. And it's the question that I always answer or talk through at the beginning of any consultation to always make sure that somebody's really clear about what we do. And I think what is most important is what we're not. So I am a registered nutritional therapist. And what that means is that I can or will work with somebody through diet to advise on diet and lifestyle changes to address a specific health goal that they might come to me with. And I'm trained to a functional medicine model. So as a nutritional therapist, I will be taking a functional medicine approach and saying, okay, well, let's look at this person's health history. Let's look at their diet, any illnesses they've had, their family history, any exposures, environmentally or stress, and look at that alongside their current symptoms that they're presenting with. And then I would work alongside any other practitioners or medical doctors that they're seeing. So it's not unusual. Most people I'm seeing are under the care of a doctor either for that symptom or something else. So they might be on various medications or undergoing tests for the problem that they're coming to see me about. And so that doctor might have diagnosed something and they're coming for extra dietary or lifestyle support for that. So, for example, celiac disease or ulcerative colitis or, something like that. So we do not diagnose, and I think that's a very important point to make. As a nutritional therapist, a doctor will diagnose, we don't. And we don't treat. But what we will do is work to intervene through diet and lifestyle changes, taking that functional medicine approach to support a health goal that somebody might have.
And I can remember when I first started reading about nutritional therapy, as you say, there are these very important distinctions between what's within your remit and what's beyond it. I know that there's a guy who had a really successful column in The Guardian called Dr. Ben Goldacre, who spoke about the varying levels of professionalism that exist within the industry. So from your approach and from a functional medicine approach, what exactly does training look like, and how comprehensive is it before one can declare themselves to be a nutritional therapist?
Yeah, great question again. It's a really frustrating situation that we can sometimes face as nutritional therapists. So, my background is I used to work in marketing, as you know, and decided to retrain. And that retraining for me, about 7 or 8 years ago now, I went back to university, and that required 3 years where I did a postgraduate diploma in personalised nutrition. So for those 3 years, I was looking at what is a nutrient, going back to physiology, anatomy, biology, chemistry, going right back to the science and the nutrients involved in the interactions in the body. That was that. So that I did a postgraduate diploma. I've also started a master's. I just didn't quite finish it due to busy family life, but that can be completed. But alongside that, so someone might choose to do a BSc, an MSc, or a postgraduate diploma in something to do with nutrition or nutrition science. But alongside that, what's really important to become a nutritional therapist is also, alongside that, I did a diploma in nutritional therapy. And so, it's no different than anybody training in a medical environment. You can learn all the science that you want and you can do everything, but you've got to be able to work and practice safely and ethically in a clinical environment. And so, that was a good year of training alongside the new personalised nutrition postgraduate diploma. And that's learning how to safely work with somebody, making sure, as I pointed a minute ago, if I've got somebody who's coming to me and presenting with symptoms and there's a red flag, I need to know what those red flags are if I need to tell a doctor immediately. Or if somebody's on medications, making sure I don't recommend anything that I've not checked for interactions.
So we're not talking about a 2-hour course that you can take on the internet and print off some sort of certificate.
No, we're not.
And I suppose in many ways you face this additional burden where, frankly, even for your average interested person who wants to take a look at nutrition, there's just so much stuff out there that it's really difficult to distinguish and discern sage advice from snake oil. So I guess even with medicine, diagnosing problems is complex, but when it comes to nutrition, I suspect it's very much a personal thing. And even when you do have a very good solid understanding of the individual that you're working with, the actual field itself is also quite a maze to navigate.
Well, it is just amazing, isn't it? I started reading about nutrition, so I'll give my age away, 48. So I'd say I was in my mid-20s when I first picked up a book, and you saw the odd book on nutrition then. And now, fast forwarding many years later, it's everywhere. Everyone, there's a book, all you've got to do is Google stomachache or, bloating or autoimmune disease, and you're just inundated with books and websites and advice being thrown at you from everywhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of it isn't great. A lot of it is great, and backed up by some really good scientific evidence. And so it's, from my perspective, I know what I'm looking for, and I know the research papers that I'm following, and I know the authors who are reliable. But for the average person who picks something up, it could be quite damaging for some people, or just, I've had people sort of turn it with me, and they've almost made their condition worse by, saying, well, I went vegan because vegan is a great thing to do, isn't it?
Right.
Vegan can be a great thing to do for some people, absolutely. But for other people, no, it's not the right thing to do. And so it in some respects, I think it's great because people can take more control over their own health. But you really need to know what you're looking for and what you're, be able to understand rather than going for a fad diet. And that the quote I use with most people is, one man's medicine is another man's poison.
Right.
And personalized nutrition. Everything that I work on, or most nutritional therapists, is going to be personalized. So, I can have 10 people lined up in front of me with the same condition, and they're probably going to all be doing 10 different things. It doesn't mean to say that everybody has to suddenly, go dairy free, or everybody. It's just different for everybody, and I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I guess the idea of personalized medicine and an approach that's very much tailored to you also applies to people's health goals more generally as well. So the other side of that equation is the specific thing or things that people are trying to achieve in doing this. So what are the sorts of health goals that people will come and speak to you about? Or indeed, do you have to help people articulate what exactly it is that they're trying to achieve?
Yeah. I always start any session, once I've said what a nutritional therapist is, what we do and what we don't, and sort of the guidelines. But goal setting is really important because I have I think it must be about a 15-page questionnaire that I send to somebody before they come and see me. So I get a lot of information. So before they've even turned up to see me, or at the moment through Skype, I pretty much know what's going on. Because the health history gives me that indication.
And what are the sorts of things that you include in that comprehensive questionnaire?
Goodness me. So I am, straight away I want to know their health history. I want to know what illnesses they've had from childhood. I want to know what medications they're on at the moment, any major surgeries, and any environmental exposures. So you'd be surprised how many people might have had toxic exposure, mold exposure, metal toxicity. Stress. But if someone says I was really well until my father died, and then 6 months later my husband got cancer, and then a year after that my mother was diagnosed, we've had a bit of stress then. And so looking at stress, we're looking at what their sleep has been like, but we're going back a lot of the time right through to childhood. I'm asking questions as far back as, do you know if you were breastfed? Do you know if you were cesarean born by cesarean section? Because the research and a lot of the evidence is showing how some of that can influence things like microbiome and that kind of stuff. So they're the kind of things. On top of that, I want to know what's going on at the moment, what their main symptoms are, what their current diet and lifestyle is, so what they're doing. And then, right, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Right. Really, that initial consultation is about trying to get a solid understanding of where the person's coming from, and then turning that set of perhaps challenges or problems into more sort of action and outcome oriented goals.
Absolutely. And that first session is an hour that I do, which always runs over. And because there's always a lot. But yeah, someone can come to you and they've got their head in their hands and they just go, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired. I want to have some energy again. And we've just got to, before delving into why they're tired, but try and reframe that. Well, what is it you want to achieve? What does being energetic look like for you? What would that achieve? So for one person, might be, well, I want to go back to running, 5 miles every other day. But for someone else, that might be, I want to be able to actually just make it to the shops and be able to drive without being exhausted for the rest of the day. So, different goals mean different things to different people. So it's reframing. The most important thing is to try and reframe that into something positive.
Right.
So if there's one thing which is, I don't want to feel tired anymore, to, I would like to be energized again.
Yeah.
They're just two different, one is a achievable goal, one is something you don't want to be. And I try and put positive reframing on that kind of stuff. That's what we're trying to get to. So it's a bit more specific and a little bit more positive framed.
Yeah. And you mentioned tiredness and fatigue. I'm aware that you serve a very specific demographic within the UK, but is that something that's quite common? And what are the other sorts of things that people tend to come to you about?
Yeah, so I work at 2 clinics. I've got my own private clinic, and I work at a specialised clinic in London called the Optimum Health Clinic, which specialises in chronic fatigue. So naturally, since that work is predominantly fatigue, so if I just take that out of the equation for a second and look at my private sort of practice, 80% of what I normally see is normally fatigue, digestion, or weight.
Right.
And they're coming to me with either I just don't have the energy I used to have, or something's happened either over time or dramatically, or they're presenting with some kind of digestive issues, bloating, cramping, diarrhea, constipation, pain, or I want to lose weight. It normally is one of those 3. I tend not to work with weight loss as much these days, and that's just more because I have colleagues nearby who are specialised in that, so I often refer back to them. But it tends to be one of those. But then you start delving down though into that. Fatigue, where do you start? Fatigue can be anything from imbalances in blood sugar, thyroid problem, another type of hormone imbalance, perimenopause, menopause kind of stuff. It could be stress related. It could be vitamin deficiency related. So, you've got to really try and figure out what is it that's driving that. And again, with digestive issues, where do you start? I mean, there's so many different types of issues. But in the main, it tends to be one of those 3.
So when it comes to setting those health goals for things like fatigue or digestion, what are the, obviously this is a very specific thing to each individual, but what might a realistic health outcome actually look like for somebody, and how do you manage their expectations as you move towards it and keep them motivated?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because a great example could be digestion, and it's amazing how many people have a digestive issue. So they might say, well, yeah, I just really want to get rid of this bloating and cramping that I get. And then when you start to explore what's going on, they've had chronic diarrhea on and off for a year, or even several years, or they're chronically constipated and go to the toilet maybe once a week, or they just their diet is so restricted because every time they eat certain things they have to rush to the toilet or they're in agony. And so it's amazing, I think, with digestion, and maybe other things, but definitely with digestion, how people almost just accept living with something, and things start to become the norm. And it's not until you start to delve into that and you say, actually, that isn't the norm, to just be a bit bloated pretty much most of the day, and then it gets severe. So for someone in that situation, then, it's setting expectations from my side that these things, if you've had an imbalance for 3, 4, 5 years, it's not going to take 2 months to sort it.
Right.
And so it's working with them at the start to say, this might be more complex than we realise, and setting goals for them whereby we have almost small steps to achieve. So what do we want to get to, for example, in the next 3 months? Well, in the next 3 months, it would be nice that I can go out and not feel that I need access to a toilet.
Okay.
Which is, for some people, that's how bad it gets. Or I can eat 3 meals a day and not be in pain.
Right.
And then in the next year, that I'm having a normal regular bowel movement, and that I can eat a wide and varied diet and eat out in a restaurant. So you're setting sort of almost, instead of just saying, well, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow after I've changed my diet, and I'm going to have no pain, no bloating, bowel movements are going to be great, and I'm going to feel great all over. It's having small little goals to achieve along the way. And then I use a tracking tool. So because each time I meet with somebody, and normally it's about every 8 weeks, normally I'll meet, that I will do a symptom tracker. So for their digestion, we might find we've got 4 different symptoms that we're tracking, and we'll scale it out of 10. And each time when I first meet with them, I want to know what that score is out of 10. So my bloating, bloating could be 9 out of 10, right? 10 being the worst. So next time I meet with them, that's gone down to a 7. That's great. Still quite severe at a 7, but we're not as bad as the 9.
Yeah.
And so by tracking it that way and then reporting it back to me, it's easy if you've still got it to not see the progress until you're tracking it that way.
Yeah.
And you can say, actually, do you know what? 6 months ago, you were a 10 out of 10. We're now down to a 3. This is great.
Yeah.
We're still not back at 0. And so that's another way of looking at it.
It's really interesting you bring that up, because one of the things I actually do, and this might be quite a nice segue into some of the different aspects of lifestyle we could talk about, is on a Sunday evening, after finishing a 24-hour fast and breaking fast and having dinner, I have a tracker that I've been running for the last year or so, which basically looks at some of the umbrella categories of lifestyle, or at least the things to me that I can track and can pay attention to. And every week I'm giving myself a score on them, so that if something is underperforming, and by that I usually focus more on the process than the outcome. In other words, have I done the things I need to do to get these things to be in as good a shape as possible? If there's something that's coming out as underperforming, then the following week I'll pay particular attention to making sure that it's back on track. So I guess from a health perspective, because I do this for aspects of career and personal creative projects as well, but for health, it's really looking at sleep, exercise, meditation, and diet. And then for each of those things, just saying, okay, have I got myself into bed at the right time to aim for 8 hours? Have I got up and moved my body every day this week? Have I managed to fit in a daily meditation? Have I been doing my 5-2 intermittent fasting and getting the right amount of calories and also, decent meals? So essentially what I try and do is keep myself honest as to whether I'm at least doing the right things in terms of process to lead to the best outcomes. I guess my first question is, are those categories the right sorts of things to be thinking about? In other words, sleep, diet, exercise, some sort of mindfulness practice.
They're all so important. And, I might be a nutritional therapist, but if I was to just focus on the food, I wouldn't be doing my job properly. You can eat brilliantly. You can get the diet that is right for you for whatever it is that your health goal might be or health issue that you're trying to overcome. But frankly, if you're not addressing any stress, you're not sleeping properly, you're not doing appropriate exercise for you, and you're not having that downtime, so for some it's meditation or whatever it might be, then you may as well just chuck the rest away, because we need to be thinking of all these things as a package.
So I know that obviously we've said already that this is very much a unique, tailored, customized thing, but what are the common things that you see that are getting in the way of a good night's sleep?
So screen time late at night, people just hanging around on the phone, watching TV too late. And there's plenty of research to back that up. I'm not a sleep specialist. There is a fantastic book, Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. If you haven't read it, I urge anybody listening, read it. It just the importance of sleep. It's so important, but it's all those activities that build up to what lead a good night's sleep. So I think the first one is this blue light and not switching off. And then you can put some of it down to diet. If you're drinking alcohol and you're having 2 glasses of wine every single night.
Which isn't that uncommon.
But no, it is not uncommon at all. And two big glasses of wine is a lot, And so they're drinking that and then they're zonking straight off to sleep. But you're not really going off to sleep. The alcohol's knocked you out. And then about 2 hours later, your body's really waking up and you're spending the rest of the night in this disturbed sleep. And, because, the alcohol's detoxifying from you, your blood sugar is all over the place. So that is a real classic one. And it's trying to have that delicate conversation about alcohol. Especially sort of, affecting sleep, because they think because they're going off to sleep. Now, they think because they're going off to sleep, okay, that it's not affecting them. But you've got 2 types of sleep issue. You've got the I can't get to sleep problem, which some people have. And then you've got the I'm going off to sleep okay, but I'm waking up 3-4 times in the night. So I think there's often different reasons for those. And having a lovely bedtime routine of ideally not having any screen time, a good hour before bed, ideally longer. Having some plenty of fresh air and natural light during the day. Eating appropriately, making sure the blood sugar is balanced well, and having some downtime before bed. Yeah. But then you get these other people who, they go to sleep, but then they're waking up a lot in the night, and that can often be a sign of other issues such as the thyroid or other hormone issues or stress. And so, for example, if someone is really stressed, and I, for example, might do a cortisol test. So we have something called the circadian rhythm, okay? And the circadian rhythm is if you start at about 7:30 in the morning, we have this hormone called cortisol that it becomes elevated. And then that slowly by about midday starts to gently dip off. And so that by about 10:30 in the evening, that has dropped beautifully. And then melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, kicks in. So if that lovely circadian rhythm is thrown out of balance in any way, and you see, for example, that the cortisol on a test for somebody is elevated in the evening when it shouldn't be, then how are you going to get to sleep if your cortisol is elevated and your melatonin's not kicked in? So I'd be questioning then what is going on with regards to causing that cortisol to be really elevated. And that is often due to stress. And I'll come on to the reasons for that in a second. Well, another thing you might find is that people are waking at the early hours in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock, and you look and their cortisol is normal in the evening, but first thing in the morning is exceptionally either low or high. And so their body is kicking in and sometimes producing adrenaline that's maybe waking them up. So we can do lots from a bedtime routine to make sure we're doing everything we can to stimulate the melatonin and the natural body's, the natural body clock for the body to go to sleep. But there might be other things which are being driven by stress or other imbalances. And cortisol, it's called the stress hormone for a reason, because if somebody's stressed, then the body, or if it's under any intense stress or shock, it will produce adrenaline. And the adrenaline in the body is there to create that fight or flight response and make sure that you can respond accordingly, dilated pupils, faster heart rate, that kind of stuff. But if that stress is continuous, then the body has an after effect hormone called cortisol. And cortisol plays a really important role in the body of helping to balance blood sugar and regulate potassium and sodium levels. It helps with our sort of metabolism. But as I've just explained, it helps with the sleep pattern. And so if we are constantly stressed or not having any downtime, or we're exposed to chronic stress, and then that cortisol is constantly elevated, then we start to see these signs of sleep disturbances or things like that. So sleep is a very complex one, and you've got to really dig deep to find out what the problem is.
And I guess beyond those sort of hard and fast rules about screens and alcohol, I guess it's very much then up to the person to experiment with and understand whether they're a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hour person as well. And yeah, I guess there's probably a lot to unpack when it comes to sleep. And it seems like a bit of a catch-22 as well, where elevated stress or elevated cortisol causes a rough night's sleep, and then you wake up feeling even less refreshed and even more stressed, and your cortisol is even higher. So it must be quite difficult to really untangle that loop and get it flipped into the other direction.
It is. You can get in this sort of perpetual cycle, can't you, where you've not slept well, so you rely on coffee to keep you going, and coffee is a stimulant, and that stimulant then helps the body to produce adrenaline, and so you then experience the adrenaline response, and that then leads to drops in blood sugar because that's used all your glucose supplies. So then you're craving either more coffee or more sugar foods, so you don't eat well. And then you end up sort of, that can then encourage, somebody to continue to keep drinking the coffee throughout the day. So that's going on throughout the day. So then you're never going to get to sleep and you're just stuck in this cycle. And you've got to go really slowly sometimes with sleep issues. But then that starts to affect the immune system, and then you're into a whole nother ball game of issues.
And I would like to talk about diet. And I know we mentioned veganism slightly earlier on in the conversation. And I'm less interested in trying to sort of deconstruct all of these different fads that exist. But do you have any hard and fast rules for what people should be thinking about when it comes to making good diet choices?
It's keeping it simple. And so it doesn't matter what they're coming to see me for, whether it's a complex illness or whether they just want to just make sure that they're doing the best that they can to give them a good and healthy, long life. It's about getting those basics right. And so the fundamentals of any diet, whether you are a vegan, whether you're vegetarian, whatever your sort of any ethical beliefs that you have around food, the basics are getting those basics right, having a nutrient-dense diet, and that to me is about making sure that you've got macronutrients balanced. So macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And so if you naturally have a diet that is very high in carbohydrate helps to release energy through breaking down its components into sugar, glucose. And so if you are flooding the system with glucose constantly from carbohydrate, then potentially you could lead to quite fluctuating imbalances to do with blood sugar. And in the long term, you're talking about type 2 diabetes, high risk. And so carbohydrate, we've got to make sure that, first of all, there's a little bit of that in the diet. And if you are getting a little bit of that's the right amount and the right type. So carbohydrate can be a bagel, right? Or it can be some sweet potato. So it's about getting the right type of carbohydrate that's higher in fibre and slow releasing. Yeah. Right, so that's the first thing. And whether you are a vegan, vegetarian, or you eat meat, that part is irrelevant. But of interest, I would say most people I have seen who have been vegan or vegetarian have overconsumed on their carbohydrate to compensate for the lack of meat. And so it's just teaching them how to balance it. And then that leads me to the protein. And so protein, we get most of that. We get our complete proteins from animal foods. So whether that be dairy or meat, fish, eggs, that kind of stuff. And we need to make sure that we are getting plenty of protein in the diet. Back to that, that's the second macronutrient. And protein helps, it's the building blocks. So it helps, the children to grow, helps repair muscle. But protein also helps us to feel fuller for longer. A carbohydrate, you're breaking that down and digesting it in 30 minutes, whereas a protein sitting in the stomach for a good couple of hours. So if you're eating that protein with a little bit of that slow releasing carbohydrate, you're going to feel fuller for longer. You're going to feel more nourished. And so now for those people where meat isn't something they want to do, then that's where we need to make sure they're getting plenty of protein from things like beans and lentils and nuts and seeds. So there's plenty of non-meat options out there. It's just making sure that there is enough in the diet to achieve that. But then there's fat, and that's the other macronutrient. And fat, is broken down to saturated or unsaturated. And, a little bit of saturated fat has been shown to be okay. But we want to make sure that, the fats that go in the body are helping us. So first of all, fat helps us it provides us with some energy in a sustained and longer time. So the carbohydrate gives us energy, and that's quick releasing, whereas fats will stay with us for the day. A good egg, that's why people have egg, for breakfast, because it's got the protein and some nice fat in it. And those good fats, omega-3 from fish and seeds and nuts, and the omega-6 we get from nuts and eggs, and the omega-9 from like avocados, and and all those oils that we're having, they have anti-inflammatory properties. And so it's about getting that balance between the right type of carbohydrate that's slow releasing, a good protein, ideally mixing some animal sources and non-animal sources, and then some good fats. And then alongside those, making sure the diet consists of micronutrients. So that's the vitamins and minerals. So, and that's where we get, making sure that we've got all those lovely colours. And I just say to people, this is about the colours of the rainbow. Are you eating brightly coloured fruits and vegetables? Are you having, ideally 8 vegetables a day, 2 fruits? And now back to goals that we talked about a minute ago. Some people would freak out at that and they're only eating 1 veg. So that's a case of saying, well, okay, over the next month, I'd like you to move that up to 3 veg a day. And then we start to build up to 5. And before you know it, they're eating 8 a day and they have never looked back. But are you eating a mixture of those cruciferous, green, leafy, brightly coloured, things like peppers and carrots and, having a wide range of foods and a varied diet. So that's a long way of saying that's a balanced diet, that's where we would start from scratch.
And as you know, I spent some time living in one of the blue zones in Okinawa, Japan, and they have a mantra there. There's a local expression, hara hachibu, which is eat to 80% full. What's really interesting is when I've been experimenting with intermittent fasting and doing 2 days a week fasting for 24 hours and having 1 meal, which I found actually works quite well for me. When I did calculate the number of calories, in terms of sort of the, rough and ready recommended daily intake for men, that actually comes out at about 80%. What are your thoughts on fasting and caloric restriction?
So I'm an advocate of it for the right person. So the research is really strong, and there's plenty of studies that have shown it to be beneficial for many people. And so intermittent fasting, most certainly, I will use with somebody if I feel it's right. And by that I mean, if the body is under any form of stress or hormone imbalance and you start throwing too much fasting at them, potentially you might in the short term create more stress on the body. So for some people it's not right.
I suppose that exercise, like everything else, is also one of those very specific things for individuals. But what hard and fast rules are there when it comes to moving our bodies?
Yeah, you're right. It's different for everybody, really, isn't it? And so I'm not an exercise specialist, but I just think we've got to get that balance between getting the heart rate supported so that you are achieving some level of cardiovascular support, but at the same time, something to do with strengthening. And for some people, that is sort of weights and that kind of stuff. And then there's that element up to me, I always find stretching. And it's almost in a beautiful ideal world, you do maybe something that gets the heart rate going a little bit more, whether it be running or a bike ride or fast swimming or something once or twice a week. And then you would support that with either some weight work or some strengthening. And then the stretching, which is the yoga, wouldn't that be lovely if that would be the ideal world? Because you're supporting, you're getting the heart rate going, you're feeling energized, you're supporting your bones and your muscle, but you're also taking downtime to find your breath as well.
I guess in some ways, actually, that marries quite nicely. You've got cardio, strength, and stretching, a trinity, much like you've got the trinity of your macronutrients for your carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, or I guess thinking more broadly as well, sleep, diet, and exercise. Just trying to sort of keep it simple and thinking about things.
We can write a book. We've got it. It's sorted.
Helen, thank you so much for the time. Before I do let you go, though, we usually wrap up with a quick fire round.
Yes, I just realised. Oh, gosh, you do. Okay. Throw them at me.
Which emerging field or technology are you most excited about?
Psychoneuroimmunology. It's the study of the interaction between the psychological processes, the nervous system and the immune system. Cool. It sums up everything we've just talked about. It is fascinating. So that's one to watch out for, and I'm going to be doing a lot more reading and training on.
Is there a tool that you use in your work that you're particularly fond of?
I think my tool is my monitoring tool. Is that it's simple as that, really, which is, my symptom tracker. It's a simple table that I created many years ago, tracks the symptoms. Without that, I don't know if anyone's progressing or whether they're not. Let's not complicate it. Keep it simple. Out of 10, how are you getting on? We've got a list of 4 or 5. This is what we're tracking. Where are we? That's the tool. It's my monitoring tool. I use it for every client without fail.
If you could wave a magic wand and shift our collective thinking on one thing, what would it be?
Let medicine be thy food and food be thy medicine. There's a time and a place to go and see the doctor. Absolutely, and they do a wonderful job. But there's a time and a place when maybe just have a look and take some ownership of what you might be doing that you can do for yourself. Wouldn't it be great if we could see how much patients' outcomes can be influenced by lifestyle rather than prescribing a medicine?
Nice. What's your best nutrition-related joke or fact?
Let's be a bit controversial and throw in there, open your mind to the role of vitamin D and all the research that's out there showing the potential as a preventative tool to reduce the severity of COVID-19.
Besides booking a consultation with the food coach, what's one thing that everyone should do after listening to this?
Just get the basics right.
Nice. Helen the Food Coach, thank you so much and wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much. Keep well.
Thanks for tuning into WonderLabs. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who you think might enjoy it. You can also email us at wonderlabspod@gmail.com. This is your host, Chris Richardson. Our brand was designed by Lloyd Preston Allen, and our jingle was produced by T. Fitzgerald at For The Record. You can find more music from For The Record at soundcloud.com/WEAREFTR. Special thanks go out to Liliana Labordadosian. We'll see you next time.